Hello, and welcome back to Talking Shop, a series of tremendously fun conversations with concert artists, opera singers, composers, and choreographers. Just my favorite people in the entire universe. And today I'm really, really excited to have an amazing timpanist with us. Denis Petrunin is acting principal timpanist with the Charlotte Symphony. Denis made his performance debut at the age of 10 at the Great Hall of the Moscow Conservatory. He is frequently invited to teach masterclasses around the world and has been serving on various jury panels, including the Italy Percussive Arts Society International Competition and the Drum Wave International Festival Competition in St. Petersburg, Russia. He recently joined the faculty roster at the Curtis Institute of Music's Mentor Network online learning program. There's so much more to say about Denis, but when he hit the high points, Denis is the highest. Denis is the other half of the ViMaDeAn Duo. His wife, Anastasia Petrunina, was an earlier guest on our series, so I encourage you to go back and listen to her conversation if you have not already. Their concert duo performs all across the US, Europe, and Asia, bringing greater awareness of the repertoire for violin and for timpani. Percussion, commissioning new works and offering education for all ages. I met Denis and Anastasia at the Del Mar International Composer Symposium in Del Mar, California, where they expanded my awareness of this unique repertoire while blowing me away with their individual virtuosity. They have a wonderful synergy when they perform, and it was just such a pleasure to meet them, and it's been a delight to have both Anastasia and now you, Denis, on my show. So I wanted to begin just like I do with all of my first-time guests and just ask you, what does being a timpanist, a percussionist, we'll delve into the difference a little bit later. What is your musical life, your career? How does it affect you, and what does that mean to you personally?
Hello, Lisa. Thank you so much for having me in your show. And I think the key word in your first question is really life, because percussion and music in general is really my life. And I come from a musical family. My father was a percussionist. My mom is a music teacher. And I've been playing music since I can ever remember me. First, it was piano, then it was a recorder. Then, about the age of 9, I started my percussion studies. And really, it I don't differentiate it with other things in my life. It's day and night. It's music. It's percussion. It's what makes me going.
Yeah, yeah. Beautiful answer. I love asking that question because each guest, there's a common theme, of course, because for all of us, it is our life. It just drives us every day. But each guest also has their own individual perspective and take. It's always wonderful to hear. So you said that your parents, were both musical. How did you discover? Do you remember how you discovered percussion, timpani in particular? You want to give us a little bit deeper background and just how did your life as you know it today kind of evolve from the beginning? Maybe that's a better way to put it.
Yeah, it's been a long and very interesting and challenging journey so far. Again, as I said, my father was a percussionist, and he played in the Russian State Symphony under famous conductor Evgeny Svetlanov. They toured the world with that orchestra, and that was my introduction to percussion. I grew up listening to that orchestra, and then started my own experience studies under the guidance of my father mostly. And then when the time came, I came to the United States to audition for the Curtis Institute of Music, where I ended up going for my
Yeah.
keyboard, was when I came to audition for Curtis in the year of 2000. And I was so blown away by just the way it looked, forget the way it sounded, that I had to put a towel on the lowest octave of the instrument so I could use the rest of the 4 octaves I was used to.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Because otherwise I was just confused, for my
Yeah.
auditions. Like this is too big. I'm not used to playing it.
Disorienting, it sounds like. Yeah.
Yeah, so that was very interested. And my entire life I had great teachers. And the teacher who I ended up studying at Curtis, Don Liuzzi, who is still the principal timpanist of the Philadelphia Orchestra. If we're talking timpani specifically, I really um, owe it to him as far as my inspiration and really discovering timpani. I will never forget that Beethoven Symphony Number 9 lesson we had together, where there was, after that there was no way back. I knew this was what I wanted to do, um, for living, for life. And that's kind of how that was going for me, progressing. And nowadays, if you ask me, um, how do I define the instruments I like to play the most, I would say it's timpani in the orchestra, um, marimba and vibraphone with chamber music, and solo playing.
So, I think we have to just address this now because, I'm a musician too, obviously, but I've not been an orchestral musician. I'm a pianist and I'm an opera singer and a composer. And I think so many of us look at the orchestra and, we're so enamored with the string section. We're so enamored with, the horns have their day, different groups. And of course, the percussion and timpani have their day too. But I guess I don't know whether I'm just speaking for myself, but sometimes I think we don't notice the percussion or the timpani until we notice them. Does that make sense?
Oh
So,
yeah.
yeah. So I feel like I know so little about that section of the orchestra, and it's so important. I mean, there's so many different aspects that percussion provides to a piece, especially as a composer now writing. That awareness has become much more keen. So, would you delve a little bit deeper into the difference in what we call, I guess, percussion, which would be maybe the whole group, timpani in particular, because you're listed as a principal timpanist. What's the difference in
Right.
a principal timpanist and a principal percussionist? What about the marimba and the vibraphone? What are the real differences in those instruments and what settings are they used? Just I'm going to open the spigot and let you just expand on that for us.
Yeah, sure. This is one of the main reason why I love my profession and my instruments because we have so many different ones, and you never get bored. If you ever feel like it's too much, you can always switch in from timpani and go practice marimba and vice versa. Um, in the orchestra, it's probably a little different. Timpani, even though in my mind I don't really separate it, but timpani is kind of um, a different animal on its own. And in a symphony orchestra, there's always one timpanist, principal timpanist. Sometimes you can have an assistant, but usually it's one player on its own. Percussion, you have the whole percussion section
Right.
where you have the principal percussionist who's responsible basically for the rest of the section, making part assignments, arranging who is playing what, and such and such. It's a little bit different in Europe. In Russia, for example, um, the timpanist is the concertmaster of the whole section.
Yeah.
So the way it's set up, it's a little bit different. Here's is in the US is what I just told
Yeah.
you, what I just explained. And we certainly have, as being a percussionist in an orchestra or a timpanist, we certainly have our moments. We don't play all the time, you're right, but when we play, we really do.
It,
Uh,
it's glorious, I know, and that is a perfect description. Yeah.
and even if it's just the one triangle note you've been waiting and counting for 15 minutes, it's your responsibility to make sure it's going to be there.
Yeah.
Not just to be there, but with the right dynamic, with beautiful sound, with the style and everything else.
Well, and if I may interject, to me, the first thing that hits my mind when you say that is, wow, the tremendous concentration and focus that you must have to be able to, I mean, you have to be so wrapped up in the music to be able to wait that long and time everything perfectly. Is that an ongoing thing?
Absolutely. There's that, and you have to study the repertoire and have to know it really well
Yeah.
because you rely on certain cues. You want to know who you play it with, when you play, and things like that. So it's a combination of things. It's not just counting, but counting for sure. This is it sort of becomes like breathing.
Yeah.
You you do
I,
it so much. You can't stop breathing, so you can't stop counting either, right?
yes, I think we can all relate to that to a bit, but you in particular. And to me, I guess, I don't know if this applies to you or not, but I guess I'm just wondering if, I mean, really understanding the score, you have to do a lot of score study, maybe, and you
Yeah.
tell me, is it understanding the reason this piece was written, the atmosphere it was written in, maybe the story behind it, because, the timpani are provide marvelous effects that can really just make the whole work, honestly. Your moments are not necessarily often, but sometimes, I mean, when they're there, they're really there and they're glorious and they're so important. So I guess that plays into what you were just talking about.
Absolutely. I think the word effects applies more to percussion, if you will,
Okay.
than
Yeah.
timpani,
Okay.
because timpani, in my mind, is more of a backbone of the orchestras. Not everything you play, right? But in certain repertoire, it drives the band. I love being in the back, but in the center position where I'm in front of the conductor,
Yeah.
which helps me to hear the rest of the orchestra, um, where the acoustics is, more balanced as opposed to when you're somewhere on the side.
That makes sense.
Sometimes they put you on the risers, so that helps in that perspective too. And there is responsibility and there's a certain part of leadership you have to take, and I love it.
Yeah.
I love doing it. We played a few months ago. We played Beethoven 5, Symphony Number 5 in Charlotte with a guest conductor who was wonderful. And I remember playing the first movement, and she turned to me and she said, "I want you to lead this movement."
Wow.
And in my mind, I knew exactly what she meant.
Hmm.
It doesn't mean just playing louder or looking better or something like that.
Yeah.
I had to stay more on top of the beat, if you will,
Hmm.
um, leading the brass section, the trumpets, playing a little bit up front, a little bit forward, was a little bit more sparkle.
Yeah.
And and she said, "You know what I mean, right?" I said, "I know exactly what you mean." And then we played for a few more minutes, and she stopped and she said, "Thank you. This is exactly what I needed."
Good.
So those moments, you feel like, again, you're right. It's a combination of responsibility, but also it's really rewarding when it's working.
Well, it sounds like you are almost in direct partnership with the conductor. I mean, and the two of you maybe are partners in providing the foundation for the orchestra. I guess you more than the conductor actually, but two different sides of that. Does that make sense?
Yes, and it doesn't happen all the time.
Yeah.
It's certain repertoire and certain places, but it's very important for a conductor and the timpanist to be on the same page about that.
Yeah.
And you can really feel when it clicks,
Hmm.
you can really feel when it does not. And
Yeah.
then if it doesn't, and it doesn't mean that, the conductor is no good or something like that. Sometimes different musicians have different ideas.
Yeah.
So, and it's very interesting. That's why it's interesting to work with different people.
Right.
And I always have something to offer what's not in the music, what's not on the page. I like to add certain musical things on my own when I think it's appropriate. I try to pick my moments.
Yeah.
And sometimes it works. Sometimes the conductors don't necessarily like that, and it's fine. You
Yeah.
know, I offer what I think is right, and then um, that's what the rehearsal process is
Yeah.
for.
Yeah.
We collaborate that way.
And that's exhilarating. Yeah.
Yeah, and with percussion is a little bit different. For example, I'll let you guess. What do you think? Um, my favorite instrument to play, my favorite percussion instrument to play in an orchestra. What would be your guess? Don't say marimba because
No,
it's
I'm not because I knew not to go there. Let me think. Um, Symbol?
yes,
Oh,
absolutely. You nailed it. Crash cymbals is, I'll give anything if there's a cymbal part. I really want to play in orchestra. I will trade that for anything else
yeah, yeah.
in
That
the
just
percussion section.
made perfect sense to me because it sounds like it would just be the perfect companion to the timpani.
So yeah, and again, cymbals have a certain power. They they provide that color of the sound which you cannot have with any other instrument, right?
Yeah,
And again, it contributes to the work to the piece of music you're performing, and it creates a certain character. It adds to it,
yeah,
and there's power in that too. I think that's why I like it.
absolutely. There's so much variety in the way you play a cymbal too, isn't there?
Yeah.
It's yeah. I mean, the brush and we could get really deep into the weeds and off track here, but we can come back and do that another time, maybe do a special episode. I think that would be fascinating. But I'm just, if you could, let's go a little bit though, but if you could talk a little bit about the tuning of the timpani, whatever you want to say also in that regard about the cymbals, different types of cymbals. Um, but I know I've seen our orchestra has done that before. They brought the timpani up in the front in an educational concert and, show the pedal and the tightening or the loosening of the top of it. Can you just, I'm not saying that probably very properly, but if you could.
No, and I'm glad you brought it up, and let's concentrate on timpani for a second. Not everybody knows that the set of four timpani, which kind of the most standard set you see in a symphony orchestra, right?
Mhm.
That the four kettle drums you see, they're all different sizes. They have their own range, and they're all tunable. These days, it's pedals, and you tune with your feet. Um, Several centuries ago, there were no pedals.
Ooh,
Uh, you have to use the um, tune with your hands,
yeah,
the
yeah,
crank the handles. So intonation is definitely one of the most important things about playing symphony, because you're playing with other people. You're playing with you're closest to the brass, usually, sometimes double basses. You play with strings, you play with winds, and you have to adjust to that too, because as you know, the the orchestra tunes in the beginning, but during the performance, sometimes that changes.
yes.
That depends on the room condition, the stage lights, anything.
Hmm.
So it's really important to stay on top of that. And this is something I really enjoy doing. I was blessed with pretty good ears and hearing. I feel like it's one of my strongest sides. So, and another aspect of that is that in some orchestras, you'll see timpanists playing on calf heads as opposed to plastic heads. Um, for example, again, my former teacher from Philadelphia, Don Liuzzi, he plays exclusively on calf heads with the Philadelphia Orchestra, and I mean it's so different from the plastic heads. It requires a lot more care and attention, but the sound is also um, provides you with so much more color and depth, if you will. But uh, there are things like sponges you have to put in your drums. You have to react to the weather. The head, if it's too dry on stage, or the lights are too bright and it's hot, you're sitting there counting rests, and the pitch is going to change on its own.
Oh my God. Are you talking about the
And
calf heads or both types of heads?
no, it's I'm only specifically talking about calf
That's
heads.
what I thought. Yeah.
Plastic doesn't react that way. These days, the really good heads, where they almost never get affected by
Yeah.
weather changes or anything like that. But with calf, you can sit and count rest for 5 minutes, and then you go back and check the pitch, and you could have gone a step or two steps
Oh
higher.
my goodness. Wow.
And then, you have to use the fine tuner to crank it back down, because if you if you rely on tuning gauges, which a lot of times we do, we use tuning gauges on timpani,
Hmm.
um, then you can't really touch the pedals, because if you touch the pedals and it's just the pitch, then the gauges are gonna get off, and there's a lot to that. Um, so I guess my main point is there's small details in timpani playing, um, which not everybody realize what we're dealing with.
Yeah.
Or for example, talking to stagehands, sometimes you need three timpani or five timpani, but you need specific sizes because if the notes you're playing are out of range on the drums they provide, then you can't play the part.
Yeah.
Um, there's also that.
Yeah.
So, but definitely between, you know, tuning, um, mallet choice, and definitely maintaining the instrument on its own, that's very, very important part of life of a timpanist.
Um, I just really love hearing all this because as I said, and it's wonderful. Strings are beautiful. The brass section is amazing. The woodwinds are, and they all have their times, and it's so great. But I think, knowing more about the percussion section, timpani, and some specific instruments is just fascinating. And I think it really um, adds a lot of color to an audience's or listener's understanding of what's going on in the music and just, why what you do is so important. I let's do venture now into the marimba and the vibraphone. And how did you, well, did you, it sounded like you grew up maybe playing a lower octave, a smaller number of octaves on a marimba. And you mentioned, being just blown away by seeing the five octave. Talk about that side of your story just a little bit, please, and what the difference is in those two instruments. And then we can lead into how you met Anastasia and go from there.
I went to the Gnesins Music School in Moscow, which is one of the um, best music schools in Russia for sure. And this is a school you enter in the first grade, and then you have all your subjects together with music, and you graduated in grade 12. Now it's a little bit different. There's a college there. They changed the system, but the idea is the same. So I transferred to that school in the fifth grade. Um, and instrument wise, all there was in the studio back then, and again, it was mid 90s, right? A really kind of difficult time for our country. So we had two xylophones, one snare drum, and a half broken drum set.
Wow.
That was it. We didn't have anything else. So the repertoire had to be adjusted to the instrument uh, availability.
Right.
But back then it was sort of normal because not everybody knew how it could be possible otherwise, right?
Yeah.
And then a year later, the school bought a vibraphone, and this was just something, this was still a total breakthrough for me. I never played four mallets, right? And on vibraphone, you often play with four pin mallets, not two. So I picked up four mallets, and I kind of self-taught myself how to play it because I wanted to play all kinds of beautiful music.
Yeah.
And um, all my life, I love playing with friends. And it wasn't just playing with another percussionist. It was actually mixed chamber music
Yeah.
setting. I played with flute player. I played with a clarinet player. I played with oboe player. Lots of winds actually. And this is how I was starting on, my four mallet playing journey. And then it's very interesting now that I think about it, that later after I graduated from Curtis, and then I got into the Yale School of Music for my master's. There I got to study with Robert Van Cise, who is a world famous professor and musician and a percussionist, a great marimba player, chamber music, timpani, anything, you name it, you know. And really the way that the program is built there at Yale is it's built really around chamber music, playing with other people and playing with your fellow percussion students. It's really great. So that was one of the main reasons why I wanted to get into that school, because I always loved playing chamber music.
Yeah.
Um, and this is where I really felt like I'm in the right place because I'm doing what I love. I'm collaborating with other musicians on an extremely high level. You
Mhm.
know, Yale Percussion Group is a world famous um, percussion ensemble group, for the lack of a better term, and just the repertoire we played there and the level it was executed on was absolutely the highest. And then this is where Anastasia and I met. She started Yale a year later than me, and then this is where we can talk a little bit about marimba
Yes.
because the first piece we played together was for violin and marimba. We became friends, and then we started dating, and we really wanted to play together. And until then, I never really played a duo was a violinist. Again, I played with a lot of wind players before.
Yeah.
So I went to the library. I found a score of Rachmaninoff romance for violin and piano.
Yes.
And we both love Rachmaninoff, and I said, why don't I arrange that for us? And this is something I've been doing again since my teenage years. I've been arranging a lot for myself and for my friends to play
Hmm.
chamber music together.
Hmm.
And so yeah, that was the first piece we started working on. And I always when I get a piano part which works on marimba, I try to play um, mostly what's on the page without leaving anything out unless it's out of range or not playable. And and yeah, that's kind of how um, our duo started with that Rachmaninoff romance, which we still play.
Yeah.
Um, what is it? 15 years later, 16 years later. Um, and the marimba was really a five octave marimba was really a key instrument to start our duo. Then there was a vibraphone and other things. It's mostly keyboards.
Yeah.
And since we're talking about the duo now, I think it's important to explain the name of it.
I would love for you to do that.
The ViMaDeAn, which consists of four um, syllables. V
Yes.
for violin, Ma for marimba,
Yes.
D for Denis, and for Anastasia.
Yes.
So, that's you can tell right away because we came up with that name not too long ago after we started playing, and marimba was there. It was not a vibraphone, or it was not percussion in general. It was really marimba.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Yeah. Um, I mean, you all perform everywhere with your duo. You're both obviously also concert musicians. Um, I just think it must be, there's so many facets of your life. Just listening to you talk, there's so many facets of your life, of you're in Anastasia's life together as musicians, and I'm sure your individual experiences, like any good marriage, you share those with each other, and it enriches the whole thing, the music and your relationship and everything. But just do you do you ever hold master classes with your ViMaDeAn Duo? I know you each hold master classes on your own. Talk a little bit about that because in my mind, until I went to Del Mar, I never really heard that much of a violin marimba duo. So talk a little bit about what you hoped, what your goals are in doing a master class. And I know that you both are trying to create more awareness of that duo, or that pair of instruments playing together. And you also are promoting new music, and you often commission composers to write for this particular set of instruments. So let's go to that part.
Yeah, sure. And I mean, a lot of what you already said is what we promote at our master classes. A lot of times when we perform at schools or universities, we do short residencies there for a day or two, let's say,
Mhm.
and then we do teach master classes together, and it's really about how to play chamber music, how to collaborate with each other. All of that from, starting from process to performance experience, um, anything what involves more than just one person in music making.
Yeah.
And we get all kinds of students, and students play for us. And, string players would have more questions for Anastasia. I get more questions, percussion related.
Mhm.
But really, communicating on a personal level. And actually, a lot of times it's funny, we get this question that, like, how do you deal with that? How do you rehearse? Your husband and wife, you must be arguing all the time. And if you think about it, there's some truth into that, but somehow we're so blessed that I don't remember us having a single fight over something during the rehearsal process. We would get into arguments sometimes, and we would discuss, but over the years, it's never been an issue for us.
Yeah.
And that's why I think for both of us, it's such a highlight to be involved with any kind of project with our duo,
Mhm.
which with our schedule, especially this year, I'll be honest with you, it's hard to manage. And like sometimes you have to put things on side and um concentrate on other things, teaching,
Yep.
playing in an orchestra. Then you come back, you do a little bit here, a little bit there. It's all about balance. Uh, we talk about that too, and we're still navigating ourselves. There's
That's a
that.
lifelong process, though, isn't it?
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah, yeah, seriously. Um, I think that's a concept that is so elusive because I feel in or at least in my musical education, or maybe just, from the way I grew up, there was this like, okay, you've got to be at this level, and then you're there, but you're never there. You're always, and that is to me the most exciting part of it because you're always learning, you're always evolving, you're always expanding. And I think that's why, getting into composition about 2.5 years ago has been so joyful for me because it's taken what I love doing already, performing piano, performing vocally, and just rounding that out and expanding it exponentially. And then I meet people like you and Anastasia, and that enriches, my knowledge of more specific aspects of instruments and what combinations can be formed. And to me, in your master classes, having those two groups, percussion and string students together, really lays a wonderful foundation for them for collaboration within the larger setting of the orchestra. I mean, is that that would make sense to me?
Yeah, and we talked quite a bit about playing an orchestra earlier today, right?
Yeah,
And for me, playing an orchestra, it's really like playing in a chamber music setting. It's just a larger group,
yeah,
but you apply same knowledge, same instincts, if you will,
hmm
to play with other people.
hmm
And sometimes, it could be a different experience.
yeah,
But I love that challenge.
yeah,
And sometimes I end up with, let's say, because I play in a lot of different groups and in the region and a lot of different players. And sometimes, let's say I play timpani and there's a bass drum player or cymbal player who is standing next to me and kind of playing on their own. And I always challenge myself. I always say, okay, can I nail it the way that we're together if that person is not necessarily cooperating?
yeah.
And then that's how I challenge myself. I adjust the way, if I can, of course, with everything else
Sure,
going,
sure.
to make it sound like we're really, really, really syncing.
Yeah,
And most of the time it works. And for
yeah,
me, it's very rewarding. And it's a different kind of chamber music, but it's playing with people.
yeah. And I
And
think, go ahead. I'm sorry.
yeah, it just to kind of finish your thought, especially for future orchestral players nowadays, you have to teach them through playing chamber music. Because if if a player ends up in an orchestra without a substantial chamber music experience and knowledge, then most likely they will have a miserable time playing with other people.
Yeah,
Unfortunately, it happens nowadays quite often because people are trained to win auditions, but they're not necessarily trained how to play with other people.
yeah, yeah.
So,
I think that's really huge. And I'm just thinking about the various experiences I've had. And there's nothing more glorious in my mind than playing with other musicians who are just their only reason for being there is just to be in the music. And we're all professionals and we're all, confident and we're all experienced. And just having that common interest, and you can feel it, when you're with those
oh yeah,
types of people. And then not to say, diminish the ability of any other musicians, but you're right, it's different. And I think it's wonderful to play with other musicians who may not think quite like you do, or may not have some of these other characteristics, but it also creates an adaptability in us that is so necessary. Because the reality is, when we go on stage, we really don't know what's going to happen for sure. There are always, we can be confident of our ability, we can be as prepared as we possibly can be, but the moment is the moment, and who knows? So I think, your point about working with other musicians, training people to be adaptable, to be able to work, not only work with anyone, but to use that experience to really make the music something glorious as it should be, no matter what. And to me, that's just the ultimate, so I really appreciate your talking about that. It's another area we could go on and on, but I want to get more into your educational efforts. I know you do the master classes, but you're also now on the uh, faculty of the Curtis Institute's online educational program. Can you tell us a little bit about that and what that's like? What is it? I know, talk about teaching in person, talk about teaching online, all of that.
well, yeah, the Curtis Mentor Network was a great project. It was mostly happening during COVID
Hmm
to expand opportunities for everyone, and it was such a great asset. I felt like for younger musicians during that time.
Mhm.
Um, right now, there isn't that much going on of it. I think they're transitioning into a different um, format.
Okay.
But you know, my main teaching occupation is between the Augusta University, where I oversee the percussion department, and a handful of private students.
Yeah.
And this is what I uh, commute for at least once a week from Charlotte. After we finish this conversation today, I'm going to go straight to teaching, so I can teach my students. I try to teach them in one day, uh, and then return to my orchestral work. And I every week I really look forward to teaching them, and it's it's a combination of factors. What students need these days, I would say that um, I try to apply uh, an individual approach as much as I can to my students, and we interact on all levels and have all kinds of conversations. And nowadays, I also feel like, we can talk about music and percussion, all kinds of stuff. I teach there, of course, but other than that, I think it's very important to say that really a lot of times students really need you on psychological level.
Yeah.
They need your support and they need your understanding. And that's another surprise. Like you said, on stage, you never know what happens. You come in and you never know what you're gonna end up teaching that day, how they gonna come in, how are they gonna react. Everybody have their own issues, problems. I try to stay um, you know, pretty close to them, not too close, of course, but close enough to establish a certain amount of trust.
Mhm.
And I really feel like over the couple of years I've been teaching at that school, I was able to uh, set up this kind of environment where my students really trust me, and that really helps the process. And I sometimes I get music minors and non-performance majors and things like that. So people have different goals. So on the other hand, you have to unify them
Mhm.
together, and we also do it through playing chamber music. A fair amount of percussion ensemble. I try to play with them sometimes when I can, and it's been quite a rewarding um, journey for me, um, because I see these people succeeding, and it doesn't mean that a person has to become world famous right away, or win a famous competition or something like that. That would be great too, but
Yeah.
on their personal level, I see them growing,
Mhm.
and that really makes me happy.
Yeah. Yeah. I think the trust factor that you cited is so incredibly important, because living this life involves so much management of what goes on in your head, and it's not just developing the technique, it's not just developing the discipline, it's thinking, positively. It's developing that mental strength, I guess, is what I would say, to get you through maybe a less than ideal performance, or help you be open to working with people who might think differently than you do. You can't really do that if you're, focused on yourself and not sure of what you're doing, and don't feel good about your own abilities. It's just impossible. So I think that's really tremendously important. I wanted to ask you, what are the things that that really excite you about the young artists that you're teaching coming up? And I guess this can apply, to maybe non-majors, but I'm going to narrow this more specifically to performance majors and students that you're grooming to be professionals like you are. Is there something that's standing out about these younger people that really, really makes you excited?
Yeah, I'll probably repeat myself in a way, but seeing them grow, seeing
Yeah,
them succeed,
yeah.
and really promoting the musical part of their life.
Hmm.
Um, Again, these days we're facing a little bit of different reality. A lot of musicians are forced to be training um, for auditions or competitions,
Yeah,
so it becomes all one path, all about training.
yeah.
And uh, then a lot of times the music is just not there. They tend to forget about it. And, sometimes I don't blame them because that's just the reality these days.
Hmm.
To be able to build your career and achieve certain things, right? But really, the musical part, the excitement and the well-roundedness of them as musicians, not just being well-rounded, um, playing all kinds of percussion instruments, that too,
Hmm.
but the balance between the musical part, the the human part too.
Yeah,
Um, we hold all kinds of conversations, and I also teach them how to communicate with each other on a musical level, on and not on a musical level, because a lot of other things I find myself seeing is sometimes new students would come in and would be lacking social skills,
yeah.
and you put that person in the percussion ensemble rehearsal,
Hmm.
and that's no fun for anyone.
Yeah, yeah,
So when I see someone who is progressing in that level, and I try to lead with my own example, and I try to apply a certain sense of humor when I can, and make sure the atmosphere is always cheerful and positive.
yeah,
Sometimes you see someone who is really opening up, and you see that person is not tense anymore, and there's a smile on their face. That's really meaningful to
yeah,
me,
yeah, absolutely.
because
Um,
makes a huge difference for everyone else as well involved.
Absolutely. I mean, there's so many aspects of our conversation that we could just go on and on and on about, and I do hope you'll come back and we can dig deeper into some of those things. And I want to be very respectful of your time because, as you said, you're at the beginning of your teaching day, and I know you're a little pressed, but I would like to end with maybe some thoughts about the future of symphonic work. I ask a lot of people this question these days because, with the um, advent of AI and some of those things, and then the experience that I had this weekend of going to our ballet's magnificent production of Giselle. I always go twice because I know the dancers very well, and I get an extra ticket so I can see the other cast. But my point with that is the house was packed. People love
Right.
live music. And I feel even though this AI thing is a little threatening, and I don't really want to specifically talk too much about that, but I think people are hungering these days for authenticity. I feel like we're at the beginning of a real opportunity there. I don't know if you share that, but I'd love to get your thoughts on, what you see coming down the road for us.
Well, it's really hard to predict which path it's gonna take, but I think that live music will always be alive. And I mean, COVID on its own and coming out of it was a great example how hungry people got
Yeah.
coming to performances and seeing live music.
Yeah.
I mean, we experienced a lot of it in this region with the Augusta Symphony, with um, Charleston Symphony, where Anastasia and I both play, and it was really interesting to see how the community reacted and how happy everybody was when we were able to resume playing. We still held concerts and recordings and s smaller audiences and social distance and all of that, but that really that was kind of an eye-opening experience for me too, how much people appreciated that we were able to carry on, that we didn't fully stop. A lot of orchestras did, but we did not. And as long as there are people like that out there in our audiences, and there are and there will be, then I think live music will be on high demand. There's also another side of that, and you can get sidetracked with that, and sometimes it feels scary,
Hmm.
with all of this technology progressing sometimes a little faster than we want it to be. But I firmly believe that if we stick to what we know is right and we teach the next generation of the same values and same things,
Hmm.
then there's certainly a hope.
Yeah.
And one thing I wanted to um, add to that is there's so many. The good side of the technology and everything is that there's so many opportunities now, and seeing musicians collaborating with different kinds of other artists
Yes.
is also a great part of it.
Yeah.
So we have to keep going. We have to pass on our knowledge and strive for the best.
Absolutely. Dennis, this has been such a delight. Thank you so much for making time out of your day to be with us today. And thank you for listening. And I hope you'll come back soon because we have a talking shop that drops every other week on a Tuesday. And you can also go to my website, lisaruthmusic.com, and see all of the other talks that are available. And we'll see you next time.